Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio, where we provide actionable health information on a week-to-week basis that can help you improve your life. Feel free, head over to justinhealth.com, where we have various opt-in video series on more in-depth health topics such as female hormones, thyroid, and gut health. Also, while you're there, feel free and schedule a consult with myself, Dr. J, and or my colleagues. We're available worldwide to provide natural health support for any of your major health issues. Again, welcome to the podcast and enjoy the show. And we are live. It's Dr. J here in the house with Evan Brand. Today, we're going to be chatting about chronic fatigue, mold issues, and other different causes that could drive chronic fatigue. Evan, how are we doing today?
I'm doing really well. We've got just a couple of papers on this, and we don't really need more than that because we have so much experience now ever since I had my issues and you and I started digging into this. It's like you and I jumped into the mold whirlwind over the past few years together, and it's been really fun learning and educating people simultaneously. We've implemented stuff in our houses that have been game changers for us. We've implemented stuff clinically that have been game changers for others. But I believe this is one of the biggest triggers of chronic fatigue is mycotoxins, and I experienced it personally. So I can tell you my own issue, I was exhausted, and I'm still recovering from that. And your exercise intolerance goes down, and a lot of that has to do with the mitochondrial damage that happens. So could you just give us maybe like a mitochondria 101? How do they help people? Why are they so important? What happens when they get damaged and all that?
Yeah, so your mitochondria, they exist inside of your cell, okay? And it's going to generate ATP. And part of, so you have glycolysis, right? That's going to be outside of the cell where you're kind of taking glucose, generating energy. And then you have the Krebs cycle where you're spitting out different amounts of hydrogens and ATP. And those hydrogens then now go into, so you have these things called reducing agents called FADH and NAD, and they gather up hydrogens. Okay. And these hydrogens, right, they enter the electron transport chain and they generate more ATP. So you have glycolysis to the Krebs cycle, right, or citric acid cycle, same thing. And then we have from there into the electron transport chain. And this is where we start to enter the mitochondria. And we need things like carnitine to help shuttle fat into the mitochondria. We need B1, B2 to help with fatty acid oxidation in the mitochondria. That's part of how the mitochondria burns fuel. To run the Krebs cycle and to get the electron transport chain set up, we need B vitamins. We need magnesium. We need carnitine, like I already mentioned before. We need creatine. We can use things like ribose. We can use things like CoQ10. These are all really, really important nutrients that fuel these different metabolic pathways. Obviously, intermediary nutrients like fumarate and malate and succinate, and then different amino acids are involved with the electron transport chain and or the citric acid cycle, Krebs cycle leading up to it. So all of these pathways, they roll and they really help generate energy and generate ATP, which is that energetic fuel source.
And there's a really good picture of the citric acid cycle, some of the stuff that you and I've learned from some of our books and studies. So we may be able to put that up in the show notes too, where if people just want to download it and look at it. I think it's kind of cool because you could look at it and you could just quickly learn all the different nutrients that fuel each part of the cycle. So then I don't want to say you could spot treat, but for lack of a better word, you could kind of spot treat and go, oh, magnesium, boom, I might be missing that. B6, ooh, I might be missing that.
100%. Yep, 100%. I'm going to try to pull up a good picture for everyone to see here so they can kind of wrap their head around it. A picture's worth 1,000 words. So if you guys can kind of understand the concept, I think that makes it a lot easier. I'll pull that up here in a minute.
Okay.
All right, cool. Anything else you wanted to highlight on that before we dive in a little bit more?
Well, you mentioned a bunch of different nutrients. And so I think the most important part to pay attention to is that today we're focusing kind of zoomed in, but you mentioned a lot of stuff that people could be deficient in for other reasons that we might not cover today. So parasite infections, bacterial overgrowth, any kind of dysbiosis that's not allowing the gut bacteria to produce some of these nutrients, that may be involved, but that's not the highlight of the show today. Today we're focusing on other triggers and other causes.
110%. Exactly. Very good. So, of course, the first thing is we have things that enter the mitochondria, and that major nutrient, that major compound that's going to enter that mitochondria is going to be acetyl-CoA. And acetyl-CoA is made from fats, carbs, and proteins. So the first thing I always tell people is we have to make sure we can digest and break down our fats, carbs, and proteins. And we have to make sure we have good proteins and good fats primarily. Carbohydrates, of course, if you're more active, you can always do more safe starches and make sure you're not doing too many grains and inflammatory refined sugar. But we need good fats, we need good proteins, because that performs and creates a really good building block for that acetyl-CoA. And we need that for really, really, really good mitochondrial production.
Yep. Let's dive into this study. This is really cool. One of my favorites, this guy, Dr. Brewer.
Oh, if you don't mind, I want to just hit one more thing. I want to set the table a little bit more for the listeners.
Okay.
Let me just do this here real quick. All right. This is a really, really good picture. Can you see that on my screen yet?
Yep, there it is.
Okay, good. This gives you a pretty good idea. So the mitochondria is kind of the powerhouse of the cell, all right? And so when you look at energy, we first have the cytosol. That's outside of the cell. This is glucose. Glucose comes in. Glycolysis means breaking down glucose. Glyco means glucose. And then lysis means breaking down. So we generate a little bit of energy here, ATP, from glycolysis, okay? Then that little bit of energy then moves into the mitochondria. So this is the mitochondria here right now. So we have acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA then starts going into the Krebs cycle. That Krebs cycle is going to turn twice, and it's typically, I forget exactly, I think it's 2 to 3 NADH are going to be spit out per 1 FADH2. And this is going to turn around twice. And then these different electrons, these hydrogens that are collected from the Krebs cycle, the NADH and the FADH2, 2 to 3 NADH, 1 FADH2, going to enter the electron transport chain, and then more ATP is then created. So I want to say it's like 36 to 39 ATP are created from glucose to Krebs cycle to electron transport chain. And I want to say it's 2 or 3 for glucose, glycolysis, 2 or 3 for the Krebs cycle, maybe 6 for the Krebs cycle. And the electron transport chain is the majority of where it happens. I want to say 33 or so. I want to say it's about 36 to 39 total ATP per this whole thing. And this is the mitochondria right here. So most of this stuff happens in the mitochondria, and then some of it happens outside in the cytosol.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. So if someone has major mitochondrial issues, according to this picture, it looks like you would still be able to generate some, but it's going to be a minimal amount of ATP created from glycolysis. Is that true?
Correct. And then glycolysis is going to be dirty fuel, right? So you're going to get a lot more oxidative stress because of the advanced glycation end products that occur when you start making a lot of sugar, right? A lot of sugar, you coat your proteins, right? This increases oxidation. Oxidations then require more electrons to stabilize it. Because when you oxidize something, right? Think of cutting open an avocado and it browns, right? Or think about cutting open an apple and it browns. You're losing electrons. That's what's happening there. Now you can easily go take a nice lemon or lime and squeeze the vitamin C from that on there, and that will prevent it from oxidizing. So the difference in your body is going to require a lot more antioxidant reserves if you start creating a lot of oxidative stress. So glucose always burns dirty. Okay. And there's a really good book by Christopherson called Tripping Over the Truth. And it's a book all about mitochondria and glucose and cancer. So there's a lot of data on this stuff already. So really important to know. That's why we want to be more fat burners, good proteins, and you can get carbs, according to your metabolic needs. If you're more active and you're healthier and more fit and more lean and more active, then you can definitely add in some good, high quality, safe starches. But you really want to dial that in according to your metabolic needs. It's not a set kind of size for everyone.
Very cool. Thanks for the picture. That's awesome to see. So where do the toxins come into the picture? Well, the toxins are going to damage the mitochondria. So as you showed here, you can make some energy outside of the mitochondria. So you can still, quote, get by, but you may be exhausted if that Krebs cycle isn't working properly due to potentially some of those nutrient deficiencies you covered that could be fueling the Krebs cycle. Maybe you've got infections or malabsorption issues going on. But we know that mold toxin damages the mitochondria a lot as well. And I actually sent you another paper in the notes if you wanted to look at it. It's called Micotoxin, Its Impact on Gut Health and Microbiota. And this is pretty cool because the end of this paper discusses that if you have good intestinal flora, they say here, it's now well established that a healthy gut microbiota is largely responsible for the overall health of the host. Findings revealed that gut microbiota is capable of eliminating mycotoxin from the host naturally provided that the host is healthy with a balance of good gut bugs. So long story short, and there's a cool picture on that paper too, Justin. I don't know if you could pull it up, but it's called Frontiers Cellular Infection Microbiology. It's a really cool picture of the gut, and it just shows on the right that you've got all these different infections like Helicobacter, you've got E. coli, you've got reduction of beneficial bacteria, and therefore the mycotoxins are not going to get excreted as they should.
Oh, I see that right here. Yep. So on that, you see a whole bunch of a decrease in good beneficial bacteria. I can share it real quick here with y'all. You can see a decrease in a lot of your beneficial flora right here. And then you can see an increase in a lot of the pathogenic flora right here. And then, of course, you have lipopolysaccharides. These are going to be your endotoxin that are the outer coating of the bad gram-negative bacteria. And then, of course, you have more of the mycotoxins. And, of course, that's going to stress out the microbiome, stress out the immune system. It's going to increase gut permeability. The more your gut is permeable, aka leaky gut, the more immune stress you're going to have, because now your immune system is interacting with compounds and toxins that it normally wouldn't. Is that correct?
Yep, that makes perfect sense. And this makes sense of why probiotics can be beneficial right out of the gate. A lot of people discuss, and you and I discuss, binders and glutathione and fixing the environment and all of that. But I mean, this shows here that bumping up your good bacteria is going to be a critical component too. So I personally implemented a 50 to 100 billion of some multi-strain probiotics, and I have felt better. Is that the magic cure? No, I'm doing a lot of things, but it has been pretty beneficial.
Yep, 100%. Yep. 100%.
Pull up that Brewer paper now. I think that's going to be the next thing we should talk about.
Yeah,
so
let's go over that.
This is crazy. So if you scroll down, long story short, in clinic, Brewer and some of his associates in this paper, they were testing using urine testing, which is what Justin and I run in clinic as well. We do a urine mycotoxin screen. And right here on the first page, it's crazy. It says right here that urine specimens showed that 93% of his chronic fatigue patients, these are known chronic fatigue sufferers, 93% of those were positive for at least one mycotoxin.
Correct. So if you look here, right, here's 112 patients, 93% had at least one mycotoxin. And again, you have different mycotoxins. You have the aflatoxin. This is common in like peanut stuff, ochratoxin. And then you have the trichothecenes, which is common in the black mold, the Stachybotrys black mold. Okay, so these different toxins we can actually test. And now it's important. Some people may test these things and they don't do a really good glutathione push. People that have really poor detoxification, they may not push these things out. So you really want to make sure a couple of days ahead of time you do a good glutathione push. And even that, you may just want to even look at the home too and do a really good plate test on your home. Again, we use Immunolytic Labs. We'll put some links down below if you guys want to procure those tests. But some people, they may have a hard time pushing it out. So it's So number one is I always recommend do a good glutathione push. If you feel icky or really bad or brain foggy or tired or fatigued, that could be a good sign. Also, if you have a lot of mold in the home, especially molds that have these mycotoxins, the nice thing about the Immunolytics lab, it'll tell you if these mycotoxins are produced by the species of mold they find. So they see Aspergillus or different mold that can be produced during water damage, then usually there's usually going to be a mycotoxin attached to it. There are some molds that are natural, like in soil and just plant degradation outside. Those are different. Some more from pet dander and those kind of things. So you're able to get a window into all those things as well.
Yeah, and I just want to say one comment about the push. When I first did my original mycotoxin urine screen, I did do glutathione for maybe 3 days, and I guess that wasn't enough because my mycophenolic acid, which is a mycotoxin that comes from penicillium, which I was exposed to, my level was a 12, which was in the red range, but it was just barely. And then when I retested 6 months later after trying really hard and doing sauna therapy, which is another way you could actually do provocation. If someone doesn't have glutathione, you could do a sauna session, then collect urine. That could also help. But 6 months later, my levels went from a 12 to a 1,700. My levels were off the chart, even though I'd been trying for 6 months to get it out and I did feel better. Some may look at that. And I've had some clients, call me and they're like, I'm crying, I'm freaking out, my levels went up, what's going on? And we explain most of the time that doesn't mean new exposures happen. That just means you're getting better at detoxification and you're pushing more out. And that's what happened to me. So my levels were really, really low. 6 months later, they were really, really high. And then another 6 to 8 months later, they were low again, indicating that I did actually detox it and push it out.
Exactly. Now, part of the reason why we were able to stick with it is because we knew that you had high levels of mold in your old home, correct?
Well, so it was a crawl space exposure.
Hmm.
Looking back at the plates, the house was minimally bad. Honestly, what I think happened based on talking to Scott Forsgren, his theory on it is that my tick bites that I got sort of set the mold in motion because I had the most exposure when I was a kid hanging out at my grandmother's house where her basement flooded many times. And I remember going down there and smelling musty basement. So I guarantee you, I've had mold toxin, just because I'm genetically unable to detox it like a lot of people are. I probably had it since I was a very, very young child. But his theory was that the tick bites basically weaken the immune system enough to allow the mycotoxins to really take me down. Whereas before, I may have had some symptoms, but it wasn't as brutal.
So it was a combination of tick bites and then some more recent mold exposure that kind of re-triggered things.
Yeah, and I think it was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I think it was a combination because I didn't really get exposed to that much. Upon looking back at my plates and comparing those to some of my clients, I'm like, you know what? This wasn't that bad. I mean, we had
How high
counts
were
in
they
this.
though? I remember them being more high.
So everything in the house was in single digits. It was just the crawl space that was in double digits. And then once we did the fog treatment, everything was back to normal. But what really screwed me is when we modified the HVAC system and we were trying to circulate the air in the crawl space better. So the ductwork was changed to make a complete loop system from the crawl space, sucking that air, pumping that air into the house, and then the house pumping back in. So it was a continuous loop. And that's what really screwed me because that setup wasn't there before. And that's what really cranked the levels up. And that's where, even after we did an initial treatment, the levels went way up is because now we were bringing in bad air into the breathable air. And so
So
once we
if I remember
reversed that,
correctly, is you had this crawl space, right? There was mold in the crawl space that was really high. The rest of the house was okay, but there was a lot of whole mold in the crawl space. They fixed the ventilation part of the home before they treated the crawl space. Is that correct?
yeah, so we treated the home.
Silly. I mean, absolutely. I can't believe that happened. I'm just like, how the heck did these guys screw that up?
I know. So then we treated it again though, and then they reversed the duct system that we had put in. We reversed all of that and then treated it again, and then it was fine. So technically, I could have stayed because the plates were incredible after that. But I needed a bigger house anyway. We had another kid coming, so it
Yeah,
was a
that
good
makes
excuse
sense.
for me to just say, "Hey, let's just go ahead and leave."
Right. But that was a big trigger for you. And then I think even in the new home, there was still a little bit more mold that came back on that home too, right? And you had to retreat that and address it.
Yeah, we treated this house as well. We had some high colonies near the kitchen, which is potentially from the kitchen empties out into a screen room. So if those screen doors were always open, bringing in outside air, outdoor molds over time can accumulate in the house and make mycotoxins. So yeah, we've treated it, and now we just do some of the maintenance solution, and we do some of the candles and such, and now we've got it under control. So
And then also
feeling
in
good.
general, you had the dehumidifier put in. So then the humidity is now a lot less in the home. So that helps. So there's less breeding ground for it. And then you also just have air filtration throughout the home. So even if things were to come in, your filters would naturally grab it anyway.
Yeah, I would assume my house is probably one of the few in Kentucky that doesn't have mold in it because even with our whole house dehumidifiers, I mean, it's pouring rain as we speak right now. The ground rarely dries out because we have so much rain here lately. And even with the whole house dehumidifiers running, we're barely keeping the house at 50%,
Yeah.
45 to 50%
Yeah.
humidity. If you didn't have those running, man, who knows? Outside right now is like 86% humidity. And you and I have discussed this many times on the podcast, but if you have humidity levels above 50% continuously in your home, you don't have to have a water event. You don't have to have a dishwasher overflow or a toilet leaking. Just the high moisture from the humidity alone can create mold. And that's what happens in many homes that you and I have tested.
Yeah, it really happens in areas where the temperature is just a little bit low, so you don't have the AC, because the AC will act as a natural dehumidifier, but it's temperature driven, where a humidifier is humidity percent driven. So I had a little bit of, so if you have if it's 65 or 70 and it's not quite triggering the AC, that's where you really get screwed because it's not cold enough, not hot enough to trigger an AC, but it's also very humid, 60, 65, 70, or it's just a basement area where basements are really cool but humid. So that's where you really need it, because then if you get a humid basement that's cool, well, guess what? It's going to, that eventually those molds are going to go upstairs to the rest of the home, even if the rest of the home is, nice and low humidity because of the air conditioner. So having a dehumidifier is important. I had a little bit of water issues over the weekend. I was changing my water filter, and there was like 3 valves you have to turn off. I only turned off 2 out of the 3, so it leaked a bit. Nothing bad. I, got 3 or 4 towels, cleaned it up. But what I did is I went in, cranked that dehumidifier down to 40%, and within 2-3 hours, any residual water that was hanging out was all evaporated, gone. But if you had 60% humidity in that basement, that water would just sit there for days on end. Once that water sits for 48 hours, it's going to start creating mold toxins.
Yeah, I'm glad you got the dehumidifier too. That's pretty much essential for where we live with higher humidity. So back to the chronic fatigue thing. So let's keep going back on this paper because this is what I had.
If you want, you can go share your screen here, Evan. You can share your screen if you like. Evan, are you there? Can you hear me? I lost Evan, guys, so I'll wait for him to kind of come back on here. I'll just keep on riffing while we are waiting for him. I'm just going to give him a message here. All right, awesome. So just chatting with Evan here on the side here. He'll be back on the show in just a minute. Let me keep rolling with you guys. So in general, we have the mitochondria. We have different mold toxins that can affect and poison the mitochondria. One of the things that we get with fungus or mold is we get things called oxalates, and oxalates can enter the mitochondria, enter the Krebs cycle, and make it harder for that Krebs cycle to work and harder to generate energy. So of course, that's going to be a big component to stressing out the mitochondria. So when we look at molds coming into the environment, whether it's molds from outdoors, whether it's molds or fungal, because they kind of have molds, right? And then you have different things like funguses in your gut, like Candida. They kind of have a similar mechanism where they're going to affect and poison the mitochondria. And different things like that can create oxalates, and they can really make it harder for the mitochondria to generate ATP. I'm going to show a couple of articles here. I got an article on mold and how it can affect, or Candida and how it can affect the mitochondria. I want to pull this up with you guys here right now so you guys can see it. So this is interesting right here. If you guys can see my screen, chronic intestinal candidiasis is a possible etiological factor in chronic fatigue syndrome. We talked about Candida syndrome, also known as Candida-related complex, putatively caused by an overgrowth of Candida. So that's an overgrowth. It's not that Candida is not ever going to be there. It should be there maybe at very low levels. It's the significant overgrowth that's the problem. And essentially, in response to the large number of patients with chronic fatigue to an oral antifungal agent, there's evidence that Candida infection of the mucous membranes depress our T cells and natural killer cells. Similar abnormalities of the immune function are found in chronic fatigue. So it's altering our immune function. So our body's ability to deal with an immune response and deal with infections and deal with stress is going to be impaired big time. This is really, really, really important to kind of highlight. And then it says, and it's important in preventing reactions like Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, herpes virus. So there are other viral infections that could play a role with chronic fatigue, right? And again, with chronic fatigue, the question is, what comes first? Is it the chicken or the egg? In other words, when you have an infection, is it the infection is the underlying cause, or did you have a weakened immune system leading up to the infection that caused the problem to begin with? That's really what the underlying issue is. Did you get the infection first, or did the infection come as a result of the weakened immune system? And I'm not sure if it matters too much we always try to line up what the likely cause is, but we know here things like Candida and gut issues can affect the T cell and the natural killer cell. This is going to be our Th1 branch of the immune system. So our Th1 are those kind of special forces that get in there and really do a lot of killing ahead of time, and they kind of the first line defense of the immune response. That's like kind of really, really, really important to highlight. And then it talks about here. And so then when you have a compromised immune system, other parasites, other viral issues may be an issue. Then mold may be more of a problem. So now when you get exposed to mold, you may have been able to whip through it, no problem. You adapted to it, but now it's like, dang, that thing really knocked down your butt. So then it said, yet the immune dysfunction found in the disorder has been considered the primary underlying cause. So this imbalance of cytotoxic T cell and T helper cells and natural killer cells is the underlying cause. It proposed that the chronic intestinal candidiasis may be an agent which leads to the immune depression in many chronic fatigue patients, and therefore it could be a causal factor in chronic fatigue. So a lot of times we have the gut stuff leads the way, okay? The gut stuff leads the way, and then everything else happens after that. That makes sense. All right, excellent, excellent, very good. I'm gonna just take a pause here for 1 second. All right, we lost Evan here, so I'm going to see if I can get him back on the show as we chat. All right, let's keep on rolling. So we talked about some of the gut stuff. Now, you can see some of these things here with Candida and mold. We can see the same thing with SIBO as well. All right, if we look at small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, and chronic fatigue, guess what? We're going to see similar things. And why? Why is it? Well, it's because of the fact that the gut is where 80% of the immune system lives. This is important. So when you look at research suggests the high prevalence of SIBO among chronic fatigue patients. One study found 77% of chronic fatigue patients had SIBO. Why? Because when you start to have gut issues, the immune system starts to get revved up, right? And when the immune system gets revved up, it gets weakened, or you start to create an imbalance, like that Th1 part of the immune system starts to become depleted. And when that Th1 becomes depleted, that's going to make it harder for you to go after and deal with other stressors like SIBO, like Candida, like mold, right? This is why the gut plays a big role, is because you have this tube that's technically outside of your body. Yeah, when you swallow food, it's technically outside of your body, because then when it goes into the bloodstream, that's now inside. Technically, it's outside of the body. You have 80% of the immune cells in the GALT, the gastric-associated lymphoid tissue. That's the part of the stomach. And then we have the MALT, that's the mucus-associated lymphoid tissue. That's in the small intestine. And if you have stressors, whether it's bugs or bad food, that stresses out the immune system. The more chronically the immune system is stressed, it creates imbalances and makes it so other things that now encounter your body, like mold or Candida or viruses like Epstein-Barr, mono, right, the kissing disease, now that's going to create more stress and really, really, really knock you on your butt. So we always have to look at what the underlying root cause of everything is, so we don't lose sight of that. Because we always want to understand what's the root cause, what are associative causes, and just because it's an associative cause, you still want to make sure you fix it, because sometimes you're not really sure. If there's 3 or 4 different infections or 3 or 4 different bugs, does it mean that, hey, each one is 25% equal? Maybe. Sometimes one's a bigger one. And we also have to make sure we set the table. So if there's food or other issues that are driving the problem to begin with, we have to make sure we fix that. What if those things have created an autoimmune issue, and now you have Hashimoto's because of the mold or because of the bug issue, right? And now the thyroid's been attacked for a decade. Well, now what do you got to do? You can't just ignore the thyroid and be puritanical and say, well, the root cause is Candida. Therefore, if I only fix the root cause, then everything else should be fixed. No, you may still have to go in there and support the thyroid because the hormone levels have now dropped, or the adrenal levels now have dropped. So you know, it's easy to be like, well, the root cause is this, everything else goes downstream. Yes, but you may have to come in there and support those other pathways so you can get better and feel better faster. If not, you may be suffering for a long time. Really, really, really important points. All right, I'm going to roll with questions, guys, and see where you're at with everything. So in general, with foods, big things that are going to stress this out. If you're eating lots of refined sugar and you're spitting out a lot of candida, the candida is going to make a whole bunch of lactic acid, and that can make it, and that can easily eat a lot of your B vitamins. So the more candida and the more bugs we have, the more you're going to be consuming and ripping up a lot of your B vitamins. So B vitamins are very important. When you have bad bacteria, it's going to make it a lot harder for you to consume a lot of those good, healthy B vitamins because your bugs in your gut are going to be consuming it for you. That's like super, super important. Bugs in your gut are going to be consuming it. Number two is the bacteria is going to produce toxins. And this is big because these toxins now put more stress on your gut. So put more stress on your detoxification pathway. So when you have a lot more gut toxins like lipopolysaccharide or endotoxin, or the different micotoxins maybe made by candida, now your detoxification pathways get stressed. And now the sulfur that your body needs to run the detoxification pathway have to get upregulated. You're going to need more B vitamins like B12 and folate and B6. So you're going to need more of those nutrients as well to run those detoxification pathways. And so that can also drive fatigue as well. Because if you're really, like, your body only has so much resources. So if you're really toxic, your body's going to allocate a lot of the nutrients on the B vitamin side or the sulfur side that may plug into the mitochondria detoxification pathway. So you have less resources over here. So just very, 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 very important to keep that in the back of your head. Okay, awesome. Okay, very, very good. All right, excellent. So it's very, very important to really keep an eye on all the resources here, because the more stressed your detoxification pathways get, they're going to pull a lot of that sulfur. They're going to pull a lot of the B vitamins, and those are all nutrients that would plug into that mitochondrial pathway to begin with. So really, 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 really important. You need sulfur. People forget you need sulfur to actually make a lot of your dopamine and adrenaline. So dopamine and adrenaline, you need good sulfur. All right. And so if you're chronically stressed, you're going to be making a lot of adrenaline, and eventually you're going to be depleted because you're not going to have that good sulfur to take dopamine to norepinephrine, epinephrine. So you deplete sulfur, because when you have dopamine, that's your feel-good neurotransmitter. You feel good, helps you focus. It's a good reward center neurotransmitter, and that will go downstream the more stressed you're at to epinephrine, norepinephrine. That's basically adrenaline or catecholamines. And these things are going to get very, very depleted. The sulfur will get very, very depleted the more you're chronically stressed. And then you'll have less sulfur. And then the less sulfur you have, you're going to have less building blocks for glutathione, for your methylation, for all your detoxification nutrients. So it really plugs in. You want to look at everything holistically so it all makes sense. All right, wonderful. All right, guys. Hey, phenomenal chatting with you. If you guys enjoy today's podcast, talking about Candida, talking about mold and mycotoxins, connecting it to the mitochondria, connecting it to energy. These are all very, very important components on how and why everything, is vitally important, and why it all connects. So in general, CoQ10, very important, anywhere between 100 to 500 milligrams a day. B vitamins, a good high quality B complex, especially if we see on an organic acid test more 4-aminoglutamate or more methylmalonic acid, that tells us B12, and it also tells us folate or B9. We may see things like xanthuronate or kynurenate, which tell us B6. B6 is important because B6 helps with our brain. It's needed for the synthesis of neurotransmitters, right? Serotonin, dopamine. So if we don't have good neurotransmitters, that's going to really, really affect our body's ability to sleep, to deal with stress, mood, our adrenals, right? B5 is a really important one. Pantothenic acid, we need it for our adrenals. It also plugs into our mitochondria. Krebs cycle, amino acids. Like, I'll see on these mitochondrial tests, we'll see low sulfur, like we'll see low sulfate or low pyroglutamate, or we'll see low picolinate, which is a sign of lower amino acids. And these amino acids plug in to the Krebs cycle. And you can see here, I'll try to pull it up on screen, how the amino acids plug in, but there's a bunch. Amino acids and the Krebs cycle. I'll try to pull it up here. Now, why is this important? Well, because if you have poor digestion, because of mold, because of Candida, guess what's going to happen to your body's ability to break down protein? It's going to drop. It's going to significantly drop. Okay, I'm going to pull this up here so you guys can see how amino acids plug in. They plug in significantly. Okay, I got it right up here for you guys. All right, cool. Let me just show this to you guys so you can see it. So this is what the Krebs cycle looks like, okay? So you have, remember, this is the glucose here is in the cytosol. That's outside of the mitochondria, okay? All right, and then this stuff here comes in glucose, phosphoenolpyruvate, pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. Now this starts to enter into the mitochondria. So acetyl-CoA is now in the mitochondria. So look at these building blocks, pyruvate to acetyl-CoA. Look what it is. People listening here, we have a video version too, so you guys can see my screen. Alanine, cysteine, glycine, serine, threonine, tryptophan, right? Isoleucine, all of these things these are all essential amino acids that plug into pyruvate and acetyl-CoA. And these kind of provide the building blocks to ratchet through your Krebs cycle. And this thing's going to turn around twice. So you have citrate to isocitrate, and then you have alpha-ketoglutarate, more glutamine, more proline, more histidine, more arginine get plugged in. Then you have succinyl-CoA, where you have more isoleucine, more valine, right? These are branch chain amino acids now. This is part of the reason why working out with branch chain amino acids is helpful. Methionine, threonine, then it goes from succinyl-CoA to succinate, where we have tyrosine and phenylalanine, which help with dopamine and adrenaline, and then fumarate to malate, malate to oxaloacetate, which is asparagine and aspartate, and then it plugs right back into acetyl-CoA. So you can see how that works, all right? You can see how that works. Very, very important amino acids. So if we have very, very poor digestion, we have low hydrochloric acid, we have low enzymes, that's going to play a really, really big role in this whole thing. So getting your enzymes and your stomach acid up, really having a clean diet, really breaking down your food, and then really working with a good practitioner to look at the mold toxins or the gut stress, the Candida in the gut, right? And it's more of an overgrowth, maybe looking at SIBO, maybe looking at H. pylori or other gut infections, looking at the environmental mold. If there is mold, how do we fix it, right? What's the root cause of that mold? Is it a humidity issue? Do we just need an air filter? Do we have to do a biobalance protocol in the home to get the mold levels down, right? So we have to look at the whole picture so we get to the root cause. So I hope that makes sense. Any other questions, feel free. I'll chime in and try to answer them here for y'all. I think we got most stuff here that's on point, kind of already dialed in. So if you guys want to reach out to evanbrand.com is a consult link. You could feel free and schedule. Also head over to my site, justinhealth.com, to schedule a consult with myself. If you want to dive in deeper, we'll put links down below. If you guys enjoy this content, share it with friends and family. Make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, hit the bell so you get notifications. It's phenomenal chatting with y'all. Really appreciate it. Just do me a favor. Try to apply some of this information so you can make yourself healthier. It's really important. When you're healthier, you become a better parent, a better person, a better employee, a better boss. And it really helps the whole world get better. The healthier you get, the whole world gets better. All right, guys, it was phenomenal chatting. You guys have a great day. Take care. Bye.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.